Keeping up with everything happening in the world, it can feel like a full-time job sometimes.
It really can. Just so much information flying around.
Exactly. And that's why we do the deep dive. We try to cut through all that noise, pull out what's actually important, and give you a clearer picture without the overwhelm.
Think of us as your shortcut, helping you get informed quickly. And today, we're taking a really close look at a whole series of presidential actions from March 2025.
Yeah, a whole batch of executive orders and memoranda. These signal some, well, potentially pretty significant shifts in policy across a lot of different areas.
We've got quite a stack here, all signed just last month, March 2025.
We do. We're going to be digging into things like achieving efficiency through state and local preparedness. There's a set of additional rescissions of harmful executive orders, and one that's pretty direct, addressing risks from Paul Weiss.
And that's not all. We'll also cover moves aimed at reducing the federal bureaucracy, consolidating government buying, trying to boost American mineral production.
Reshaping education, invoking the Alien Enemies Act regarding something called the Tren de Aragua.
Right. Plus, changes within the Foreign Service and efforts to strengthen the suitability, the fitness of the federal workforce itself.
So our goal today, our mission for this deep dive, is really to get beyond just reading the titles. We want to understand what these actions will actually do.
Yeah, what's the real-world impact? And we'll also keep an eye out for any aspects that, might seem like propaganda or maybe a bit misleading.
And if anything jumps out as a potential constitutional question, we'll flag that too. Plus, where the documents give us clues, we'll touch on the background, maybe why now, any funding mentions.
And importantly, who stands to benefit from these changes and who might be negatively impacted. That's always key.
Okay, let's unpack the first one. This is Achieving Efficiency Through State and Local Preparedness, dated March 19th, 2025.
Right. Now, on the surface, this sounds pretty, well, sensible, doesn't it? Empowering states, local governments, even individuals to prepare for threats.
Yeah, things like cyber attacks, wildfires, even space weather, which is interesting. The basic idea presented is that preparedness is best managed locally, with the federal government in a supporting role.
And that could be a really interesting shift, potentially, in how we approach national resilience. It emphasizes a much more active role for states, local entities, individuals.
A move away from a purely top-down federal approach.
Exactly. The stated goal is saving lives, securing livelihoods, reducing the burden on taxpayers, and increasing prosperity, all by fostering more local ownership.
Makes sense on paper. So how do they plan to make this happen? The order lays out some steps.
It does. First up, within 90 days, a national resilience strategy is supposed to be published, reviewed every 4 years after that.
90 days? That's pretty ambitious.
It is. And then, within 180 days, so about 6 months, a mandate to review all policies related to critical infrastructure and national continuity.
Okay, reviewing policies. What's the goal of those reviews?
To align them with this new strategy, adopt a more risk-informed approach, and crucially, move beyond just sharing information to actually doing something, taking action.
But there's a carve-out, right? Something about misinformation.
Yes, that's important. This initial review specifically excludes policies dealing with misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and something called cognitive infrastructure.
Huh. Why exclude those?
The order says they'll be reviewed separately under a different executive order, EO 14149. It suggests maybe a different track or different concerns when it comes to information-related threats versus physical ones.
Interesting. Okay, what else?
Then there's a 240-day deadline, about 8 months, to review national preparedness and response policies. This one's informed by the FEMA Council. The goal here seems to be refining the definition of federal responsibility and maybe moving away from a catch-all all hazards approach.
And also within 240 days, something called a national risk register.
Correct. To identify, articulate, quantify risks, natural ones, malign ones, to national infrastructure. This register is meant to inform the intelligence community, private sector investments, state spending, federal budgets. Quite broad, reviewed every 4 years.
And finally, within a year, the Secretary of Homeland Security has to propose changes to how the federal role in all this is communicated.
Yeah, improving communication and understanding for state, local governments, and individuals about what the federal government actually does in preparedness and continuity.
So what does this order actually do right now? It sounds like mostly reviews and strategy development.
That's right. It kicks off a lot of internal government work. It doesn't immediately change funding or programs. The shift towards state and local control, the risk-informed approach
Yeah.
that could lead to more efficiency down the line.
But could it also mean states and locals get more responsibility without necessarily more funding?
That's a definite question to watch. An unfunded mandate concern, potentially. And that exclusion of misinformation policies is certainly something to keep an eye on, suggesting perhaps a different prioritization in this specific strategy.
Okay, let's switch gears. Additional rescissions of harmful executive orders and actions. This one's from March 14th.
And the title pretty much says it all, doesn't it? This is about undoing things done by the previous administration. It follows up on an earlier rescission order, EO 14148.
The stated goal is restoring common sense and unleashing the potential of American citizens. Strong language.
Very. And it effectively wipes a large number of prior executive actions off the books, across a really wide range of topics, too.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, EO 13994, which dealt with the federal response to COVID-19 data, that's gone. NSM-3, about the foreign policy and national security workforce, revoked. Even a presidential memo on promoting LGBTQI plus human rights abroad is rescinded.
Wow, okay, so health, foreign policy. What else?
Economic stuff, too. EO 14026, the one that increased the minimum wage for federal contractors, rescinded. Several presidential determinations using the Defense Production Act, things aimed at supply chains for infant formula, solar panels, heat pumps, all revoked.
So reversing efforts to boost certain industries or protect supply chains?
Seems that way. Also gone is EO 140A1 on biotechnology and biomanufacturing innovation. NSM 18, which laid out U.S. policy on conventional arms transfers, is rescinded.
Even recent ones.
Yep, EO 14112 on reforming federal funding for tribal nations, EO 14119 on scaling apprenticeships, EO 14126 on investing in America. They're all on the chopping block here.
So what's the immediate effect of rescinding all this? It just reverts policy back to how it was before those orders existed.
Essentially, yes, it creates a policy vacuum in some areas, unless or until this administration introduces replacements. It definitely signals a sharp change in direction on things like the contractor minimum wage that will likely drop for those workers.
And the LGBTQI plus race memo reversal points to a different foreign policy stance there.
Exactly. The order calls the rescinded policies harmful, but that's clearly a judgment call. What it does is clear the decks, policy-wise. It's subtraction, mainly.
All right, now for one that's really specific. Addressing risks from Paul Weiss, also from March 14th. This one actually names a private law firm.
Which is quite unusual, yeah. The justification given in the order is that global law firms, and Paul Weiss specifically, have played an outsized role in undermining the judicial process and harming American principles.
Okay, strong claims again. Does it give specifics about Paul Weiss?
It does. It cites a partner's pro bono suit related to the January 6th Capitol events. It mentions the firm hiring Mark Pomerantz, who was involved in certain high-profile investigations alleging unethical conduct on his part. And it also alleges the firm discriminates based on race and sex through its DEI policies.
So a mix of legal activities and internal firm policies being cited. What does the order actually do to the firm?
It takes several direct actions. It orders immediate steps to suspend security clearances for people at Paul Weiss and for Mark Pomerantz pending review.
Suspend security clearances. Wow.
Yeah, and the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, has to identify all government resources going to Paul Weiss, and agencies are told to stop providing those resources where legally possible.
So cutting off government work and funding.
Effectively, yes. Plus, government contracting agencies now have to require their contractors to disclose if they do business with Paul Weiss.
Making them radioactive almost.
That seems to be the intent. Agency heads also have to review any existing contracts with Paul Weiss or firms doing business with them and terminate or modify them where they can, citing alignment with American interests, and another EO 14147, which is about ending the weaponization of the federal government.
Ties it into that theme. Anything else?
It suggests limiting access to federal buildings for Paul Weiss employees, limiting government employee engagement with them if it's seen as inconsistent with national security or U.S. interests, and generally, agencies shouldn't hire Paul Weiss employees without a special waiver.
This feels like a pretty significant use of executive power against a private company.
It definitely raises questions. Targeting a specific firm based on its legal work, political activities, internal policies, linking it to ending weaponization, frames it as a response to perceived overreach by the firm.
The impact on Paul Weiss could be huge, obviously. Their government work, their reputation.
Absolutely. And it could certainly be interpreted as a warning shot to other firms involved in similar legal or political spaces.
Okay, moving on. Continuing the reduction of the federal bureaucracy, also March 14th. This one sounds straightforward.
Yeah, the title is clear. The goal is to keep shrinking what the administration deems unnecessary parts of the federal government.
Does it name specific agencies?
It does. It lists several entities whose non-statutory parts and functions are to be eliminated, and whose legally required functions and staff are to be cut to the bare minimum.
Which ones?
Let's see. Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, the U.S. Agency for Global Media, the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, Institute of Museum and Library Services, the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, and the Minority Business Development Agency.
That's quite a diverse list. Mediation, media, museums, homelessness, finance, minority businesses.
It covers a lot of ground.
Yeah.
And the heads of these agencies had to report to OMB within just 7 days, confirming compliance and explaining any parts they legally have to keep.
7 days, that's immediate.
Very fast. And OMB and other agencies are told to reject floating requests inconsistent with this order, except for money needed for the shutdowns themselves.
So what this does is start the process of seriously downsizing or even eliminating these specific bodies.
Right. And the order doesn't really say how the services they currently provide will be handled, if at all. Think about museum funding, support for minority businesses, efforts on homelessness.
The impact could be significant for the people and communities they serve.
Definitely. It's a clear signal of wanting a much smaller federal role in these particular areas, and the timeline shows real urgency.
Okay, next. Eliminating waste and saving taxpayer dollars by consolidating procurement from March 20th.
The idea here is pretty simple. Consolidate federal buying of common goods and services under one roof, the General Services Administration, or GSA.
The logic being.
Cut waste, duplication, save money. The order argues the government spends hundreds of billions on contracts, and centralizing the buying of standard stuff at GSA, which was kind of set up for this, makes sense. Let other agencies focus on their main jobs.
What counts as common goods and services?
It's defined based on categories identified by an OMB council that deals with category management. Agency heads have 60 days to propose to GSA which of their domestic buying activities for these items could be shifted over, where the law allows.
And GSA then makes a plan.
Yes. The GSA administrator has 90 days to give OMB a comprehensive consolidation plan. But here's a key part. Within 30 days, OMB has to designate the GSA administrator as the executive agent for all government-wide IT acquisition contracts.
All IT buying goes through GSA?
Essentially, yeah, with some exceptions for service continuity. GSA is also told to rationalize, to streamline all the different big IT contract vehicles the government uses.
So this order really centralizes government purchasing, especially IT purchasing.
That's the main thrust. Potential benefits.
Yep.
Economies of scale, maybe less admin cost per agency, more standard buying practices.
Potential downsides.
Could be transition challenges. Does GSA have the capacity? Could it create new bottlenecks? Given how much the government spends on IT, that part is really significant.
Makes sense. Let's turn to immediate measures to increase American mineral production, also March 20th.
The stated purpose here is clear. Boost domestic mineral production. Create jobs, fuel growth, reduce reliance on foreign countries, strengthen national security.
The order argues the U.S. used to be a leader, but regulations have held back domestic production, making us dependent on others.
That's the framing, yes. Dependent on potentially unreliable or even hostile nations. It defines mineral, pretty broadly: critical minerals, uranium, copper, gold, others designated by a National Energy Dominance Council, or NEDC.
And this one seems to have a lot of action items, very specific steps.
It really does. It's aggressive. Within just 10 days, agencies involved in permitting mineral projects had to list all submitted projects for the NEDC chair and identify priority ones for immediate approval.
Immediate approval.
That's the language. Then, within 15 days of getting that list, the NEDC chair has to submit those priority projects to the Permitting Council for expedited review. Get them on the permitting dashboard.
So fast-tracking permits. What else?
Trying to streamline regulations, too. The NEDC chair needs to get industry feedback on bottlenecks. Plus, the NEDC chair and the Office of Legislative Affairs have 30 days to recommend to Congress how to clarify rules around mine waste under the old Mining Act of 1872.
And changes to land use.
Big time. The Secretary of the Interior had only 10 days to identify federal lands with mineral deposits and prioritize mineral production as the primary use for those areas, changing land use plans if done.
Prioritizing mining over other uses. That sounds contentious.
It likely will be. Then Defense, Interior, Agriculture, and Energy departments have 30 days to find specific federal sites good for commercial mining, prioritizing ones with near-term impact. And within that same 30 days, defense and energy are told to enter into long-term leases with private companies to get mining going on those lands.
So leasing federal land quickly for mining, any financial incentives?
Yes, defense and energy need to coordinate to ensure private projects get favorable terms under public assistance programs. Defense is told to use something called the National Security Capital Forum to attract private investment.
And the Defense Production Act is involved again.
It is. Certain DPA requirements are waived, and DPA authority is given to the Secretary of Defense and the CEO of the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, DFC, to push domestic mineral production. Mineral production also gets added as a priority for a defense industrial base program.
Any other financial angles?
Agencies supporting mineral supply chains have to drop requirements for certain types of financial disclosures, Regulation SK Part 1300, in funding applications. The DFC and Defense have 30 days to plan a dedicated DFC fund for domestic mineral investments. The Export-Import Bank has 30 days to issue guidance on using its tools for minerals. Defense needs to convene buyers and aim for bids within 30 days. And the Small Business Administration has 45 days to recommend legislative changes and issue rules to boost private-public capital for small mining businesses.
Wow, okay. This is a massive multi-pronged push. Who benefits?
Clearly, the domestic mining industry and related businesses, companies needing those minerals might benefit from more secure supply. National security arguments are central.
And who might be concerned?
Environmental groups? Definitely. Communities near potential mining sites? Prioritizing mining on federal lands could clash hard with conservation or recreation. Foreign mineral producers might lose out. The DPA waivers signal real urgency, maybe bypassing some usual checks.
Okay. A very different focus now. Improving education outcomes by empowering parents, states, and communities, March 20th.
And the core idea here is pretty radical. The order argues federal involvement in education has failed, and power should go back to parents, states, and local communities.
Failed how? Does it give reasons?
It asserts that despite lots of federal spending, reading and math scores are low. It criticizes the Department of Education for having a large PR staff and being inefficient with student loans. The main argument, education is fundamentally a state and local responsibility.
And the headline action.
It states the Department of Education should be closed down.
Closed entirely.
That's the assertion and the goal outlined. The Secretary of Education is directed to take all steps needed to facilitate closing the department, returning authority to states and communities, while somehow ensuring services aren't disrupted.
That sounds incredibly complex.
Monumental, really. The Secretary is also told to ensure federal funds still flowing during this process strictly follow the law and admin policy, specifically mentioning terminating programs involved in what it calls illegal discrimination under DEI labels, or programs promoting gender ideology.
So what does this order do? It starts the process of trying to shut down a whole federal department.
Yes, it initiates that process. If it actually happened, it would fundamentally change American education. Funding, standards, oversight. Everything currently done by the department would have to be rethought or handled differently, likely mostly by the states.
Which means states get more power, but maybe also more financial burden.
Very likely. And the specific targeting of DEI and gender ideology programs shows a clear ideological driver behind this push for decentralization. The immediate effect is triggering what would be a massive, complicated dismantling effort.
Okay, now for something quite different and quite strong. Invocation of the Alien Enemies Act regarding the invasion of the United States by Tren de Aragua, March 15th.
Yeah, this one uses some very stark language. It's based on designating Tren de Aragua, or TDA, as a foreign terrorist organization.
And the claim is they've infiltrated the U.S.
Thousands of members, allegedly conducting irregular warfare directed by the Maduro regime in Venezuela. That's the assertion in the proclamation.
Does it give details about TDA's alleged actions?
It links them to another cartel, the Cartel de los Soles, and the Maduro regime. Claims they're involved in mass illegal migration to harm the U.S. and destabilize democracies. It even cites an Interpol Washington confirmation from late 2024 about TDA being a threat in migration flows.
So based on that, the proclamation declares.
It finds that TDA is perpetrating, attempting, and threatening an invasion and predatory incursion against the U.S., acting on behalf of the Maduro regime.
An invasion? That's a loaded term legally and politically.
Extremely. And because of that finding, it proclaims that all Venezuelan citizens aged 14 or older who are members of TDA are in the U.S. and aren't naturalized, or LPRs. They are liable to be apprehended, detained, and removed as alien enemies.
Using the Alien Enemies Act, isn't that usually for wartime?
Historically, yes, used during declared wars against citizens of enemy nations. This applies it to members of a non-state terrorist group who are citizens of Venezuela based on this invasion finding.
What does being labeled an alien enemy mean practically under this order?
It means they're considered chargeable with actual hostility, a danger to public peace. The Attorney General has 60 days to publish a letter declaring this policy. They're subject to immediate apprehension, detention, removal. No right to reside here.
Who carries this out?
The Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security are directed to apprehend, detain, secure, and remove them. DHS keeps discretion under its other authorities, too. All agencies have to help law enforcement.
Are there specific rules laid out?
Yes, regulations under the Act are established by this proclamation. No described alien enemy can enter or be found here. If they are, immediate apprehension and detention until removal. Detention locations decided by officers. Removal locations decided by officers consistent with law. And significantly, property linked to them or used for TDA activities can be seized and forfeited.
The Attorney General gets to issue guidance on how to do this quickly.
Correct, for prompt apprehension, detention, and removal. And it applies everywhere in the U.S., land and water.
This seems like a really forceful use of executive power. What are the potential issues?
Major legal and human rights concerns jump out immediately. How do you define and prove membership in TDA? What due process exists? Using the Alien Enemies Act this way is a significant departure. It's a very strong signal about this specific group and perhaps Venezuelan nationals associated with it.
Okay, two more actions quickly. First, removing discrimination and discriminatory equity ideology from the Foreign Service. A memo from March 19th. The policy here is stated as ensuring Foreign Service hiring and promotion are based only on merit, and removing divisive and discriminatory policies linked to discriminatory equity ideology, which it claims were embedded over the last 4 years.
How does it define that ideology?
It points back to another EO, 14190, about indoctrination in K-12 schools. The directives go to state, agriculture, commerce, USAID, and U.S. Agency for Global Media agencies with Foreign Service officers.
And what are they told to do?
Revise the 2022-2025 criteria for tenure and promotion to remove the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility core precept. Tell employees not to use it.
So explicitly removing DEI as a promotion factor.
Yes, and directing everyone involved not to base recruitment, hiring, promotion, or retention decisions on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Also prohibiting employees from promoting or advocating for this discriminatory equity ideology in their official capacity.
It also asks them to investigate current members.
Right. To determine if any current Foreign Service members have knowingly engaged in illegal or unconstitutional discrimination, including actions driven by DEI ideology, and take appropriate action.
So this memo is a direct rollback of DEI efforts in the Foreign Service.
Clearly, removing it as a promotion factor, prohibiting advocacy for it. It signals a major shift away from considering diversity factors in personnel decisions there.
Could impact the diversity of the Foreign Service itself and maybe how the U.S. approaches those issues internationally?
Potentially, yes.
Okay, last one. Strengthening the suitability and fitness of the federal workforce. A memo from March 20th.
This one is about centralizing power within the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, specifically regarding judging the suitability of federal employees after they've been hired based on their conduct.
So OPM gets the final say on suitability based on post-appointment conduct.
That's the delegation. The OPM director gets final authority to make suitability determinations and take actions, including directing removal of executive branch employees based on conduct after they start the job consistent with law.
And OPM needs to write new rules for this.
Exactly. The OPM director is told to propose regulations amending the current rules, Part 731, to reflect this new authority and set up the process for these post-appointment suitability calls.
Does it suggest agencies will have to refer cases to OPM?
It says the proposed rules should consider requiring agency referral to OPM for a final determination. And importantly, if OPM directs separation or other action, the agency head must comply within 5 workdays.
So OPM gets a lot more power over individual employee discipline and removal across the government.
That's what it does, yes. It centralizes that authority significantly. Could lead to more consistency, perhaps.
But maybe also raises questions about political influence or agency autonomy in managing their own people.
Those are valid questions. It definitely streamlines the path for OPM to potentially remove employees deemed unsuitable based on post-appointment conduct.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive into all these March 2025 actions, wow. It's clear we're looking at a really significant package of policy changes.
Absolutely. Some clear themes have emerged, haven't they? A definite push towards state and local power in some areas, like preparedness, education.
A strong drive to reduce the size and scope of the federal government bureaucracy cuts, consolidating purchasing, targeting specific entities like Paul Weiss or those agencies.
A heavy emphasis on national security and American interests, seen in the mineral production push, the action against Trendiaragua.
And a consistent pushback against DEI ideologies,
Yeah,
explicitly in the Foreign Service, implicitly maybe in education, and the Paul Weiss order, too.
right. So this really brings up some big questions for listeners to think about. What are the immediate, practical, on-the-ground effects going to be?
Yeah, and which of these orders seem most likely to end up in court? You could see challenges based on constitutional grounds, administrative procedures.
Definitely. And maybe the biggest question, how might all these changes, taken together, reshape the fundamental relationship between the federal government, the states, and individual citizens?
We hope this deep dive has given everyone a solid foundation to think more critically about these orders and the direction they signal.
Yeah, definitely encourage you to look into the specific orders and the agencies involved if any of these topics caught your interest.
And maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. As we see these efforts to streamline, reshape, maybe shrink the federal government, are we truly getting more efficiency, security, liberty? Or are we risking unintended consequences, potentially weakening services or protections people rely on?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? Something to keep pondering.